Well, welcome everyone. I see we've still got a few people tuning in to our February 3rd meeting of the Dam Safety Task Force. I am Evan Pratt, the current chair of this task force group. Everybody is here, I believe, but to make sure that we're all, or at least as many of us as able to make it, are present and accounted for, I'd like to just start off real quick with the call of the roll.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll start from the top and work our way through. Director Ajigba.
Here, but Brad is my designee.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mindy Bacon. Okay, Mindy Bacon. All right, John Broshak, I am here from Wayland, Michigan. Brian Burrows.
Hi, I am here from DeWitt, Michigan, home of the high school football state champions.
Welcome, Brian, with pride. Director Clark.
John, I'm here. I'm calling in from Howell, Michigan.
Welcome. Director Eichinger. Okay, anyone representing Department of Natural Resources? Okay, Brett Fessel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here and calling in from Suttons Bay, Michigan.
Oh, I'm envious. Welcome, Brett. Dr. Holgren.
Hello, John. This is Marty Holgren calling in from Manistee, Michigan.
Welcome, Marty. Dr. Infante.
Here from Lansing, Michigan.
Welcome. Douglas Jester.
Here calling from East Lansing, Michigan.
Welcome, Douglas. Jim Kochever.
I am here calling from Ishpeming, Michigan.
Welcome. Paul Maloka.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Welcome, Paul. Tanya Paslowski.
Hello, everyone. Calling in from East Lansing, Michigan.
Welcome, Tanya. Evan Pratt, let us off. Bill Rustern.
Here from Alden Township, Ingham County, Michigan.
Welcome, Bill. Commissioner Scripps.
Here from the village of Northport.
Welcome.
Just north of Suttons Bay.
Dr. Vitan.
Here from Houghton, Michigan.
Welcome. Abby Watkins.
Here from White Cloud, Michigan.
Welcome, Abby. And Glenn Wazorek.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Thank you. So, Chair Pratt, I had everyone except for Mindy Bacon and Director Eichinger.
Great, thanks very much. Again, appreciate your continued efforts. And I do want to thank the whole task force. It's been quite a lot of work here in the last couple of weeks, but finally we're at a day where we have a complete document up for everyone's review. I believe that's also been made available to the public. I don't know if it's going to be possible to share a link to that report just for anyone who has not been able to chase down where it's at, but maybe we can put that in the chat box as we're moving along, just so people know how to find it. I will get to the approval of the agenda, but just want to mention for folks who are tuning in, I guess, as well as the task force, in the past few days, we've had some task force members comment about a few items that are in the draft. As we had asked of task force members, hey, let us know ahead of time what to talk about. So I just want to point out that on our draft agenda that we'll take a motion on here in a minute, we've got a section, the third item says task force final report, and we've allowed a little over an hour. We may take a little more time than that, but when we get to that, I'll discuss a little bit how we'll tackle these. But it looks like we've got about 5 items. 4 of them are very specific text edits, and 1 of them is a little broader discussion on the tone of the report. And I just want to be able to give people a little bit of a heads up that we'll be looking to have discussion on that going forward. So just so people know kind of what's coming their way. With that, I will seek a motion to put the agenda on the table.
So moved. This is Abby.
Second.
All right, thanks. Anything anyone would like to see added to the agenda? or subtracted? If not, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed, same sign? All right, seeing none. How about the approval of the January 13th draft minutes? I'm going to have to admit I didn't spend as much time on those as the report writing, but would anyone like to put those on the floor?
This is Douglas Jester. I move approval of the minutes.
Great. I saw Brian Burrows raise his hand, so
I'll
we'll
second.
take that as support. Anything that needs to be modified in the minutes? I know a lot of us zoomed down to where's my name and did I really say that? What was I thinking? Any comments though on the minutes, seriously? Going once? Going twice? Because I know sometimes it's hard to unmute quickly. All right, all in favor of accepting the minutes as presented in our packet, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Sounds good. Great. Now, the next item we've got on our agenda is a little bit, where did our agenda go? Thought I had a copy up for myself in case it wasn't on screen. Sorry about that. I think we're on to a quick report from the director though.
I would be happy to talk for a minute, Evan, while you're pulling up the agenda. I was thinking about this a little bit, preparing for our final meeting and wanting to share just a little bit of context. So I'm going to go a hair more than quick, but not a lot more because I know we have a ton of work to do today. But I did want to take us back to our first meeting and really the charge that was in front of us. So our charge is to review dam safety in Michigan and to provide recommendations on policy, budgetary, legislative, and enforcement reforms that can be advantageous for this program. And so, in the course of that, we looked at a lot. This has been a very detailed conversation with some very important expertise coming from the stakeholders that have been offering up input, as well as what we've heard in public comment in every session, as well as in our public comment section. And so, we've talked about things from the statutory structure, the budget and the program of the Water Resources Dam Safety Program. We've talked about the adequacy of the dam safety standards. We've talked about the state of Michigan overall approach to dam management, and we've talked about the need for investment in dam infrastructure. And I know I speak for myself and my fellow directors when I say that, we take this work very seriously. And I appreciate the input from the state of Michigan perspective that the directors have and the departments have put into this. And most importantly, the information and the expertise that comes from those of you that have given of your time and energy to support this process. When we talked about it at that first meeting, we talked about a lot of things we thought we'd explore, including the public and private ownership of dams, the strength of the legal authority to influence the outcomes necessary for public safety. We talked about ecological concerns. We talked about the interaction of the regulatory authority, certainly from a state perspective, but as it interacts with the local and federal partners. And then in the course of the work that we did together, what did we actually hear? So this was interesting. I went back and looked at my notes and looked at the minutes. We heard recurring themes about accountability and ownership. We heard that responsibility and authority must be intertwined. We heard discussion about public safety and the public trust. We heard discussion about long-term disposition of the dams. There were many comments about removal, a lot of input around natural resources. And again, we got back to that local, state, federal interaction and the role of FERC in all of this, as there are different pieces. Those regulatory eyes are important right now, particularly with some of the dams that are at play in the Midland area and the regulatory limbo that exists right now because of what's going on there. So when we think about next steps for this report itself, I think it's important to share up front, there will be legislative conversations. There will be pieces of this that the legislature is interested in picking up. and creating more context, detail, and frankly, putting their stamp on. And that's an important part of the process. So this is a report. This is not statute, right? There's that kind of next step of discussion that's necessary. There will also be budget conversations. We're looking at a governor's exec rec very shortly. And there are administrative pieces. And so I did want to share with you some of the pieces that Eagle has already been working on. And we look forward to doing more here and to working with all of you to improve these programs. So based on the input and conversations that had happened, not only in the course of this work, but prior, Eagle was able to create a dam safety unit and allocate additional resources there through the support of the legislature as well as the executive. We've done additional hires. We have expanded the information that's on our website. As I have said, hopefully in every meeting, I'm very committed to transparency and to doing that work within the department. We have increased what's out there. We've also done a pretty extensive mapping exercise that I think folks are aware of. And we have the appetite to do more and appreciate the work of this group because the recommendations here will act as an opportunity to give us a stepping stone to be doing more. So that was a little bit more than a quick update, Evan. Mr. Chair, I hope you don't mind. I just thought it was important to create a little bit of context as we have this discussion here today and move into what will be the next phases for a report like this. So with that, I hand it back to you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks very much. I'll say the short version is there's a lot of work to do and you all are gearing up to get it done and to make sure that you're getting input from stakeholders on some of those items that really do touch a lot of people. So very appreciated. And so we're going to pull up the screen again. So any other updates from any of your other team members? I'm not sure if you all wanted to have anybody else chime in now or if that's just more for the end.
That's all from Eagle for now.
Great. Well, then I think we're ready to move into the task force final report. So as mentioned, we have spent quite a bit of time on our recommendations, and folks on the task force recently saw some of the text that kind of, in typical to these reports, sandwiches the recommendations. You need to explain what's the status of today and what's the vision for where we're headed, kind of those recommendations, and also to be able to touch on a little bit, where do we need to end up? Why is this important type of thing. So what we're going to cover now is comments from the task force members that will allow us to finalize the text of that report, make sure it's something that is ready to be shared. That happens today, that's great. If we find out we've got obstacles, we'll have to figure that one out. But for today, we've got 5 items to go through. As I mentioned before, 4 of them are pretty detailed text edits. So we'll end up having those up on the screen. And I know Aaron is getting ready to transition to those. But what our process will be for each of those items were suggested by one of the task force members. So I would just ask that as we get into each one, that the task force member who suggested it, makes a motion to put this on the floor, and we seek a second. And as long as there is a second person who says, yes, let's discuss the suggested text change, we'll go ahead and have discussion, hoping to keep that discussion to maybe 10, 15 minutes total. So use your raise hand buttons, task force members, if you would like to provide a comment as far as, I like this text edit, it makes sense, I'm going to vote for it, or someone who says, geez, I worked pretty hard to get that text that's there, and I don't think I can vote for it that way. I liked it the way it was. And at the end of the day, we will go with the majority rules as far as making these first 4 detailed text edits. As I mentioned, we do have a 5th item that is more about the tone of the report, and given the amount of time that we have and the need to just kind of get everybody's general feeling and reflection on, is that appropriate or not? I think what we'll do is spend a little more time talking about that after we cover these first 4, and basically give everybody on the task force 3 or 4 minutes to to kind of state their position on the tone of the report. And again, we'll take a simple vote with everybody. We might have to kind of go around the room and do a roll call, yes, no, and that will kind of guide us as to, do we stick with the tone of the report more or less as written, or do we feel like more work is needed in that area? So hopefully that's going to work for folks. Talk about that last fifth item a little more, but let's just start right now with the detailed recommendations for edits. I'm going to, Elizabeth, turn this over to you just real quickly for who made the suggestion and what the recommended change is. I think you're highlighting added text here.
Yeah, Evan, that's part of the that highlighted there as part was included in the text edits that came through. So let me know, Elizabeth, if you want me to go through these or.
So the first one was a comment that Brian Brose had mentioned and was seconded by Bill Rustum and Brad, I believe, Weifrick. And
no, I think we'll just start with this one. We'll take them one at a time. So I apologize.
yeah, number one. I'm just saying number one was mentioned by 3 people.
Great, thank you. And again, I apologize. I got some bandwidth issues. I apologize to folks. I'm going to just turn off my camera and keep going here. But my understanding is the question in front of the task force right now is, should we add the highlighted language to this report? Am I correct there?
This is Brian. I can jump in just on number one. I think this is pretty minor, and maybe it's really just a question for the director. Just the term gubernatorial popped up, and I just was not positive whether that was accurate or not. So it's pretty small, and it's really up to the director.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Brian. And Bill, you're correct. It's not gubernatorial appointment. So
we were appointed by you, correct?
You were. That's correct.
All right, so we would
and again, one of the reasons I am so grateful.
Gotcha. Oh, I sorry, I'm just seeing the item up here clearly. I understand better where I was miswired. My apologies. So on the first item, does anybody on the task force have any additional comments or not? I think I'll just go ahead and second Brian's recommendation just to kind of keep this one moving. Anybody want to use the raise hand to make a comment? With that, I think we'll just take a voice vote on this one. I don't think it's very controversial, but just to formalize it, if we're all in favor of approving this recommendation, we're basically saying that instead of saying that we had gubernatorial appointments, that all task force members were appointed by the director. Is that correct, Brian? That's what you're looking for?
Yeah, fine. Yep.
So all in favor of that recommendation, please say yes or raise your hand. Yes?
Yes.
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 Any opposed to number one? Excellent. I like the direction this is going, folks. Okay, number two. I will turn it over to the motioner just to avoid too many words by me.
Sure, thanks, Evan. It's Brian again, and I will say that for both of these did not rise to things I cannot live with, so they are low pressure. On number two, essentially, there's in the discussion under improving dam safety under the rationale box, the highlighted sentence during discussion there was anecdotal information suggesting the private sector was drawing back from insuring some dams. The following two sentences, I think, do a good job of suggesting the possible solution to be considered, to be sensitive to that. I was just suggesting that maybe that sentence wasn't needed since the language seems a bit informal for the report. But that's it.
All right.
And I would agree with Brian. I don't like anecdotal information anyway. I mean, we ought to be more assertive than that.
Okay, I'll take that as a second to get this on the floor for discussion. Does anybody else have comments about basically trimming this sentence out? Sorry, I'm scrambling to see our committee members right here. I'm not seeing a hand raise right now, so If any committee members do want to comment, I'd say just jump in right now in case I've missed your name. All right, not hearing anyone. I think I'll just go ahead and ask again, just like we did before, for a simple voice vote on removing the highlighted text. All in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right, I just raised my hand and realized nobody could see me. I'll try again with the bandwidth here. Anyone opposed to removing that sentence? Okay, this is good. We're moving right along. On to number 3.
Okay, sorry about that. So this one is a little bit more content oriented and not language. So essentially in the Appendix D under the possible dam licensing framework, which I recognize, is an addition that went through committee, but it wasn't a formal recommendation. Under that though, I guess I should say that after our last January 27th meeting, I got approached by some members of the public who just picked up on some things and wanted to elaborate. And the nature of that were concerns that a listing of a dam under Part 307 in and of itself may or may not satisfy being in the best public interest. And so, I did not find easily a place within the primary sections of the report, but doing my best to try to be responsive to that and agreeing with that notion. I identified that there was a section in the licensing framework proposal where that could be addressed and where we may have entered that notion that Part 327 or governmental ownership of a dam in and of itself would deem it in the public interest. And so in that section, subletter I is, governmental ownership of a dam. II is listing under Part 307. And then the 3 and 4 basically go further and actually just propose some general guidelines for how the department would deem if a dam was in the public interest that are more universal and descriptive. And so this was just a suggestion to try to be responsive and try not to create a scenario where we're affirmatively saying, listing under Part 307 in and of itself is an adequate sort of balancing test.
Quick question, Brian, because I'm looking at the language and there are 2 I dots here. And so are you talking about both of them or just the one? The first one says the structure existed as of January 2021 and the structure is licensed by the FERC or the structure is owned by the United States, state of Michigan, or an agency of the state of Michigan. And then there's the second I is the structure is a lake level control structure established and maintained pursuant to Part 307 of Act 451. And then 2 is the structure existed as of January 2021 is being considered for an initial license under this act and meets all the following criteria. So I just want to be clear on which of those we're talking about.
Thanks. If you look down and find section G, so this wasn't particularly for the initial license, but if you look under the section G, measures of public interest, it would be the section G part of that.
Would be say that again, it would be the
section G. It's a little bit further down in that licensing proposal.
I suspect we might be on this topic for a little longer than the past 2. I'll see if we can't maybe put the exact text on screen. I appreciate that for the audience and even for me, I do not have that text open in front of me right now. So I know PSC is going to put this up. I think it's okay, Bill and Brian, if you keep working on the clarification. I'm taking Bill's questions as a second to put this on the floor anyway. So we'll have this item up in a couple of minutes here. Everyone can just bear with us anyway. I would say while we're pulling this up, not because I wanted to know this, but Part 307 actually does not have any language in it about abandoning a lake level or removing the lake level control structure. The word perpetuity is somewhere in our report. That doesn't mean that one couldn't have a structure determined not in the public interest and go back to the court and request it. But I learned in a situation where I've got one that I feel that the affected property owners who are paying may find that the cost of keeping a particular control structure my office has to be much, much more than they would like. So that's how I learned that there actually isn't a mechanism currently in Part 307 for how do you stop having a court order level. Again, we're planning on just going to the judge. Perhaps there's some case law we haven't found or what have you. I'm not saying at all one way or the other than in my situation, I have personally found, it's my opinion, that we've got at least one control structure. It's not in the public interest. And I have to present my case basically to the folks who are live on that lake and would like to have the lake level maintained. And it'll be up to them to decide if the cost is too much for them to bear. And that will be part of determining the public interest. I only bring that up to mark time, but also help describe a little bit of the rabbit hole that I think that Brian is talking about. If you just say they're all automatically in the public interest, that means it's up to somebody to prove that they're not in the public interest in the future. And currently the statute isn't clear on, well, how are you supposed to do that? It's pretty clear on how you're supposed to prove it to start up. So you could probably infer, but. So in the meantime, between my ramblings, Aaron has managed to highlight the specific text that we are talking about. So the request here is to delete item I and II. Is that correct, Brian?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And again, I recognize this is just a proposed policy framework. And you know, it would receive additional work later on. But my proposal is that III and IV are a little bit more universally applicable, and I wouldn't want to unintentionally label and promote that just governmental ownership and or Part 307 inclusion by themselves are a robust suggested public interest measure.
Great.
What if we eliminate, let me ask you a question. If we eliminate this language, aren't we then saying we're going to have dual licensing of FERC dams? FERC dams would no longer be exempted and they would fall under the same criteria.
Well, then, yeah, I think that we would be suggesting that, but I don't think it would be necessarily proposing a similar safety-based regulation scheme. But if you're suggesting that we leave the I sub 1 just to spell out that we're not trying to create duplication with FERC, you know, that would make sense. But this is really for that licensing thing and not an overlay of like the Part 315 regulations on top of already FERC licensed ones.
That cover your question, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we want to go to the dual license. I mean, we've talked about that quite a bit, and I don't think we want to go to the dual licensing. We have another section in here that says, you know, information needs to be provided to the state, but to move to dual licensing doesn't make sense to me. And then secondly, just so I understand, If a dam is operated by the United States or the state of Michigan, haven't they already determined that that is in the public interest?
That's a great question. I'm not aware that there is any process where anybody has undertaken that, but fair question.
Hey, this is Douglas Chester. I'd like to weigh in on this a little bit. This isn't entirely my work product, but I was the first writer of this. So the couple of things to think through. One of them is that, at least as this is written, it does in fact provide for dual licensing in the sense that there is would be a license issued by the state of Michigan for a FERC licensed dam, but it would be licensed basically because of FERC licensing it. And then that's important in two respects. One is further down, there's language about financial responsibility, and that language would apply to a FERC licensed dam. The case in point, that caused us to meet with Edenville and Sanford is an example where FERC did not have the tools to require financial responsibility, and doing a bit of dual licensing gives us a way to do that. At the same time, other part of the language does avoid bringing it under the dam safety inspection program, which I agree that we should not be doing, in these recommendations, in where it is subject to FERC inspection.
Okay.
And then,
sorry, Doug.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I've said mostly what I wanted to say.
Okay, I was just going to ask if there were other task force members that wanted to comment on this. I didn't see a hand raised, so I think it's okay if you want to just speak up.
Stan Baton, just a quick informational point, and that is, as I look at the where I live here, there are a lot of 307 lakes and covered under 307, and then we have, I think, 19 315 dams. Is it possible that what we're talking about, and this I don't know, I'm an engineer, not a other person, that 307 lakes will fall under now 315 through these rules, through these recommendations? Is that an issue or a possibility?
Could we get an answer from staff or an opinion from staff? I guess if you're not sure, that's okay. But I'm thinking that's sort of an ego question of if they receive this recommendation, is that the direction that they would be heading, or do they feel like that's what we've asked of them? Is that fair, Stan?
Yeah, let me just add that it's the 15 acre feet rule that we added in that will put possibly some 307 lakes under 315. Yeah. I don't know if this is a place to ask it either. I apologize.
Address that, Luke. Yeah, I can address it really quickly. So 315, all dams that that meet the size requirement are regulated under 315, regardless if whether they're regulated under 307 or not. So we have a lot of dams that are regulated under both, right? They have a legal lake level established under 307, and they meet the size requirements for 315 safety regulations. So if you change the size requirements, you might, if there's a 307 dam that's on the fringe that would be included in the new size requirements, there's a possibility that some of them would. But a lot of the 307 lake level dams don't currently meet the size requirements for 315 regulation and would not continue, or would continue to not meet the size requirements. So
okay, that's because of the 6 foot rule and not because the 15 acre would put a lot of them in there.
Those are an and statement, right? It has to be 60 and 15 acre feet, and as it's written now, 5 acres. So it has to meet both to be regulated under 315. And I don't think we're proposing it, or the support.
Thank you.
Yep, okay, no problem.
I'm just going to step in again, Mr. Chair, and remind folks that, we're building recommendations that then go through would have to get picked up by the legislature, go through the regular or the legislative process through, work groups, discussion, public comment, blah, 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 blah. So just making sure I'm reminding us that of kind of how this process all fits together.
Yeah, and I appreciate Brian acknowledged that up front. Other comments from task force members? Anybody feel strongly that we need to eliminate this now? That we should vote on eliminating it? If we don't vote to eliminate it, it's going to stay in there like this. Obviously subject to the context the director mentioned. Anybody have comments? Okay, seeing none, Brian, would you like me to take a vote on this, or are you comfortable enough with the opportunity to come back and revisit this? I get the idea that there is a little bit of weeds to dive in here that maybe everybody isn't equipped with right now.
Yep, I respect that. There'll be much more work to be done before that becomes a law, but. I don't really also from a process standpoint have any idea of how the rest of the panelists are or are uncomfortable right now. I'm very much fine if people are uncomfortable of just, setting sail without it. That is no problem, but I can't really gauge whether everybody's sitting there comfortable with it or uncomfortable.
Sounds good. Well, I laid out a process up front that said we'd vote after we got through with discussion. So I don't think I'm going to vote for this, partly for the reasons that a couple of people raised of we might have some bathwater to throw out, but we might be putting the baby out with it. And I'd love the chance for that to get parsed out more. That's just my personal thinking on it. But I will now ask everybody, we'll take it as a voice vote if it seems close. I will ask John to just call the roll on it, but I'll just take a voice vote now. Can we hear a hand raise or a yes from folks who agree that we should delete items I and II as proposed? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right. And anyone opposed? Please same sign, raise your hand or say aye if you're opposed.
Aye.
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 Okay, I don't think we have critical mass to remove it. I guess one more time, I think we'll move on from this. It didn't sound like we had enough of a close vote, and these are not binding votes, of course. It's just, like Brian says, a chance to get some feedback on this. I know we are recording the discussion too, so we certainly have a chance to double check if I've got the scoring wrong, the voice vote. With that, we'll move on to number 4, if we want to slide that up the screen a little bit. Thanks for toggling back and forth too, Aaron. And I apologize, Bill, was this your suggestion?
Yeah, I just,
Go ahead.
we talked about, it talks about policy options. I don't think options is the right word. I'm just, my only suggestion is to change it. I'm not strong about this, but change it to objectives, because what we don't want to do is say, oh yeah, you can choose this option and forget all the others. We have a whole list of recommendations. So all I want to do was change the word options to objectives.
Got it. And is there support for that change, just so we can put it on the table?
I supported. This is Brad. I had responded as well because Bill had referenced something in page 8. It's repeated again on page 35 as well.
Yep.
But the idea of an option does kind of seem to give that you have an either or something else, where instead I think we were providing those objectives.
Yeah, it's not a menu. It's a really big meal, basically. Yep. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. Do other task force members want to comment on this at this point? Raise your hand or go ahead and start talking and we'll sort it out.
Mindy Bacon, I agree with it.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing no other commentary, then sounds like this is kind of like number 1 and 2. All in favor of changing policy options to policy objectives in those 2 locations, please signify by saying yes or raising your hand.
Aye.
Yes.
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 And those opposed to the change, same sign. Oh, no, wait, I'm not opposed. Sorry. Okay, hearing none, that's good. So now we're going to move on to an item that's a little more nebulous. I guess I would say the tone of the report. I apologize to members of the public who may not have seen this, but essentially the task force was provided with a report, and we spent a lot of time on the text of the recommendations themselves in Chapter 3, but there is a Chapter 2 that provides some supporting background information, as well as a conclusion that the task force members reviewed. And a couple of folks had shared that we didn't discuss the exact wording of all those documents as a group, and suggested that we might want to spend some time on that now, because there is a lot of language and there were a lot of thoughts or ideas of how we might edit or change or suggest those. What I'm hoping we can do is just get a pulse, take everybody's temperature on the task force today, and just get a little bit of a sense of, do people feel like the language was exaggerating the extent of the issue or problem, or overstating the need for revisions, that type of thing. So it seemed like enough people wanted to talk about this. I'd like to just go forward and just go around the room and give everybody sort of one shot at this, so we sort of have a temperature feel for, is it kind of 50-50 if some people feel it's about right or not strong enough or too strong in the urgency and the need to reduce risk in the whole portfolio. And we can take a vote after everyone has gone through it, just to say we probably should leave it as is, or we need more work on this, and right now I think we need to just get through that step. And if there's general agreement or a consensus or a majority that says we need more work on this as a team, then we'll have a discussion about, well, what does that look like? Who should be involved? How do we get into wordsmithing and all that? So for right now, I'd like to just kind of go around the room and get people's thoughts on, I guess everybody pretend you're Goldilocks, right? Is this too much? Is this too hot, too cold, or just about right? And maybe give a couple of 3 minutes of supporting discussion. And I'll go ahead and ask Paul Maloka to start. Sorry about that. I know another guy named Paul Lamakia. Paul, go ahead and start. I know you brought this up, and it was as much about just not having the opportunity to digest, but go ahead and give your thoughts on this for a couple, 3 minutes.
Yeah, hi, Evan, thanks. So, to start with, I support all the recommendations that are in Chapter 3. And I think a couple things. One was, that my understanding of our charge was to suggest solutions to a problem that is known, and the premise has been given that we have an issue here in the state. And so what I was objecting to or questioning was this further elucidation of that problem, as though it sort of reads like we have advanced that understanding in what we have done. And I think my thought is that all the things we write in here should be flowing out of the core recommendations, which is Chapter 3, which is how do we address the problem, and that for this to be taken into the next level of policy and to tie this together in a more strong way with existing conditions of the state dams and the severity of the condition of the dams, and how in the level of urgency and commentary on, or I don't want to say commentary, but judgments, judgments being made on those points, to me seem seemed out of our charge, and that's why I flagged it. And then I guess just in general, the tone, yeah, and you could say that's partly tone, but it ties into the same thing, which is just this, maybe the stridency a little bit is not not what we were asked to do. I guess maybe that's just a way to put it. And not, again, I'm not saying that these judgments are wrong, and I'm not saying that someone doesn't need to be the one doing that. I guess just my impression is that that wasn't the charge of this task force. That's all I had to say about it.
Okay, thanks, Paul, and thanks for being pretty concise in that too. I know it's always tough to bring something up and be the person who is in an uncomfortable position of questioning things. And I forgot to mention up front, I did send out a note on this, but it was very late. Just so people are aware, the officers of the task force here did assist with drafting of those items. And although we all have a little bit of a different lens, as you know, from our backgrounds and the types of things we talk about, I think everyone was honestly trying to take into account the things task force members said at the beginning and throughout the process about what they were concerned about, what they wanted to spend time on, as well as the public commentary that we heard, of course, at several of our meetings, you know, most recently on the 27th. With that, I'm just going to go through our list of panelists as they are up on my screen. So I have next on my list, Bill Rustum. Bill, do you have comments on the tone?
Well, yeah, I hear what Paul is saying, and there is some language in here. I went through, Paul, what you had in your edit, your read, and there is some language that certainly could and probably should be toned down just a little bit. And now I disagree. I don't agree that taking chapter 2 out is a good idea, which wasn't, you know, I think you have to have an overview of the dams, and that, as I reread the thing, is simply an explanation of what is. Not, I don't see many, and I don't think you pointed out many problems with that, with chapter 2 in terms of its tone. But I do see some language that could be changed and not be quite as I'm going to use a bad phrase, but kind of fear mongering. You know.
Yeah.
So
Bill, I don't want to pinch on your time, Bill, but just to clarify, I was not suggesting that we scrape chapter 2 out of there, simply that it was identified where it was coming from.
Okay.
Next on the list, I have Abby, and keep in mind, we are talking about things that you feel like you really can't live with. You're not going to feel good if the report goes out the door as is. That's kind of in the context of the input or comments. And I think I'm hearing Bill say, you know, he's kind of feeling that we do need to take another crack at it. Is that right, Bill?
Yeah, some of the language that Paul identified, there's, you know, I can pick out a couple if need be.
No, that's okay. I just want to make sure I'm clear. Yeah. I'm trying to keep score of the temperature here.
Yeah.
You're a little too hot is what I hear you saying.
Yeah.
Abby, do you want to comment on just the nature of this or any experiences you have with these type of things?
No, at this point, I have no further comment, and we'll defer to what the group feels is best with the tone and proceeding forward.
Okay, thank you. Brad, comments from your end?
No, I think I'm pretty much where Bill was, and I appreciate the clarification. We don't want to throw out the entire section. There is a lot of great information, a lot of good background in there, but I think there's an opportunity for a little bit of tweaking so that, and again, I don't want to use a bad word, but editorial stuff is out of there, and it's more focused on what the task force came up with specifically.
Mm-hmm. All right. Brett, I have you next on the list if you're ready for some comments.
Thanks, Evan. Generally, I mean, I do acknowledge the short time frame and kind of allowing for a little digestion to occur, comfort on the tone and so on. Urgency of the recommendations. I would agree that we would want to try and keep to the mission of, or the focus that the task force was assigned to do. However, I feel compelled to say that, you know, I tend to support some urgency over this in some ways. I mean, this is a significant issue, significant challenge, and I would tend to think that the public in particular would probably be more supportive of the urgency in the tone, just for kind of setting it, or setting that exclamation point. But all that said, I will defer to the group in terms of how the final looks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Brian, I've got you on the list next here.
Yep, I think I, largely agree with what I've heard so far, in that, there's probably a couple of sentences in there that might be a bit edgy, and I would, support those being adjusted. But by and large, I like the report. And I would not want us to edit out the sense of urgency behind this problem. It's kind of been done for too long. I remember the calls and the reports about this problem at least 20 years ago, and I don't think we can tone down the sense of urgency behind it, but I would support, some tweaks to maybe get rid of a couple of edgier sentences.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. I've got Dan Scripps next. Dan, you are still on mute if you were looking to comment right now. All right, I'll try coming back. Maybe you had to go for a drink of water or something. Dr. Infante, Dana, are you with us now? I know you had, there you go. Go ahead.
I want to say, I personally, the tone didn't raise any flags with me, but hearing people's concerns today, I definitely think it's important that some of these statements get another look. I do agree with Brian and Brett, though, that having some emphasis on the urgency of dealing with this should be in there in some way. So again, I just think it needs a little more thought.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Gosh, I really appreciate everybody's thoughtfulness here. I know it's kind of hard to wrap our arms around, and everybody's being very concise with their commentary. It's been great to work with everybody in this group. Doug, what are your thoughts on this?
So I'm about where everyone else is. I'm, willing for us to do a bit of editing work, but I think it's fundamentally the report is about in the right place. These recommendations are important, and it's important that they be acted on reasonably soon. I mean, it's not that there is an emergency to declare, but there is an urgency to not let this problem fester yet longer after multiple decades of festering. So a call to action seems in order. We can tailor it.
Yeah, makes sense. Dr. Baton, Stan, I've got you next up here.
I'll make it quick. I did discuss this with Paul in the middle of a cross-country skiing yesterday.
Both of us.
I guess the thing that struck me was just I was surprised. I being an academic and seen master's theses and doctoral dissertations, I don't like to be surprised with chapters that I've never read, and I guess that was my main point. But I agree with Paul that certain aspects of it do need to be toned, but I do agree the urgency of it's there also. So I'll agree with the other folks.
Okay. Glenn, what are your thoughts on this one? You responsible for a few good-sized dams and do hydro and all the fun stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think I'm very much in line with everything that's been said so far, and I also appreciate the take that Paul has had on it. I guess I asked myself if the language would substantially change the next steps moving forward one way or another, whether it's in or out, and I guess that's one way we could look at it. I guess I'm inclined to move forward, you know, wondering if the tweaks have a substantial impact. You know, as I think we all know where this is all heading in the next step. So I guess I don't know that I feel strongly enough one way or another. I do support tweaks if we wish to take the time to do so. I think I'm also supportive of moving forward if desired. So thank you.
Thank you. Jim Kachiver, you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, probably similar to everything that we've heard. And thank you for the time. You know, I will say as I went through it, nothing struck me as inappropriate, did not have a mind towards changing the tone. Also, now that the subject's up, I think that, you know, the view of the tone should be viewed as in the form of the recipient. You know, we're writing this thing, but frankly, we're creating a tool that's going to be picked up by somebody else to, I'll say, try to evoke some change. I think that it needs to be strong. I think that it is. Now, with all of that said, fine with going through it and tweaking some language as well. But I was not coming into this conversation thinking of advocating for any great change. I think it's a good document.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, John Broszak, I've got you next on the list here.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it to 3 minutes. I respect Paul's position on charge, and I will tell you, I've had to ask Director Clark on a couple of occasions to clarify for me what our charge was, and that's been very helpful. But you know, I'm here to represent what's arguably the largest FERC-regulated owner-operator of river hydros and pump storage, including one of the largest impoundments east of the Mississippi and the 4th largest pump storage in the world. And if I can put it in context, you know, what's happening on the FERC level, we almost had the failure of the nation's largest dam in Oroville a number of years ago. And the impact of that is just finally starting to flow through the regulated owners that are responding. And you know, if you aren't familiar with that situation, you know, despite significant regulation, we had almost a catastrophic failure and, you know, causing evacuation of hundreds of thousands of people, and really tough to explain how we got there. I was honored to be asked to participate here, and I wanted to make a difference. And I will tell you, I've learned a great deal from all of you. And I've learned a great deal of the situation in Michigan outside of the portfolio that I'm asked to have responsibility for. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned as a citizen of Michigan. I did not realize the actual status of the non-FERC regulated dams. And I'm very concerned. You know, I had the chance to tour the entire infrastructure post failure of Edenville, Sanford, et cetera, and it's horrifying. And I don't want to talk at all about blame or how we got there, but you know, I felt that our charge was to make a difference in sending a message that this would never happen again in the state of Michigan. I feel that you know, and I certainly recognize that you know. With my respect for my public safety consultant friends, this is a tight timeline. And when the officers discussed, you know, how do we wrap this up, we did really feel like the executive summary and setting the right tone was going to be necessary to kind of put a bow on the specific recommendations. I'm unapologetic. And I think I would like to see us even go further on the call to action. I'm just balancing out everybody else's position. I do agree we need to make sure that our language is selected carefully. I don't know that the time we've all had to review that allows for collective input on it, but I want to be bold. I want this to make a difference. I want it to send the right message, because I certainly recognize the process going forward. It's not like everyone's going to say, thank you, we will do exactly what everything you said. There is going to be a tremendous amount of opposing views, which is fine. That's the way our process works. But the bolder we are, the better chance I believe we have to address a ticking time bomb in this state and protect people's property values and up to and including their lives. And so that's my personal perspective as a member of this body. Thank you. I think I probably ran over 3 minutes. David, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, John. Tanya, I don't believe I've called on you yet. Just trying to juggle all of this. Your thoughts?
That worked out well that I get to go after John, because I think he stated that beautifully. We've seen the results of the status quo, and it is devastating. And that is what we're responding to in this effort. So I do also appreciate what Paul was raising. And I think there are two places that I saw where I kind of get, maybe it verges on a bit of hyperbole in the way that it's written and might be able to be toned a little bit. But generally, I really think that it's a well-written document, and that this group has put forth a fantastic effort to try to really get to the heart of what's needed here in the state. So appreciate everybody's work.
Yeah, thank you. Mindy, I don't think I've called on you yet on this one either, and I'll go back to Dan if he's on after this too.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of it. I think a lot of the language is important. Maybe just changing, like on page 7, it says like all recommendations need to be implemented for state. Instead, maybe saying these recommendations should be implemented so the state's dam network, to soften it maybe a little bit, which I can mark up and send in. But just a couple things like that, not necessarily removing a lot of it, more just tweaking the language a little bit so you're not just making accusation type statements.
Do you kind of fall with the group that's saying the tone is more or less appropriate, but some of the word choice does need some work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Starting to hear that more and more. Dan Scripps, just circling back and double checking you're on here. Okay, maybe having trouble with the mute button or something like that. And Director Ajaba, I don't know if you're tuned in directly. I know Brad made some comments and has been with us, but I want to give you the opportunity, since you have been formally appointed, if you had any comments on the nature. I know you're experienced with these blue ribbon reports and running them through the legislature, certainly.
Thank you, Evan. No, I share Paul's comment about this. Again, not everything we put in here is going to be adapted, but I think it's good to put in what we think the task force has come up with. I'll tell you, if you did not make it out to Midland to see the destruction of properties and infrastructure, and it's devastating. So the charge here is for us to put a very bold recommendation, and then let the powers be decide on which of the recommendations they will adapt or not adapt. So thank you for giving me the time.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you joining us today too. Director Clark, I'm looking for input from all the task force members, but I think a couple of people have mentioned our charge, and I suppose it's useful for us to hear your perspective on all of this type of stuff, since you technically don't actually get to vote.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like I kind of laid this out a little bit up front and re-articulating the charge and talking a bit about what has been in front. I really want to see a task force report that reflects the work of this group. and helps us move the conversation forward. You know, I was really struck by a conversation that I had with Brian Burrows, and it was interesting that he brought it up because I remember distinctly where I was when we had this conversation, I think in August or September, where he said, we've been doing this for 20 years. This work has been ongoing, and we can articulate a variety of different reports and action and, well, not really action, reports and efforts that have been made to talk about the need for action here. And that's been ongoing for quite some time. And so I think that I'd really like to see something that reflects the thoughts of this task force, of this group. I think that hopefully we can have a conversation about, you know, what does it take to get it there so that people feel like it does reflect. And, you know, I've said this, you know, a couple of times already, but I will say again that reports are really important because they set the table for future discussion. So I've had conversations with the legislature already about what they might have appetite for, depending upon, you know, the completion of this task force report, which, you know, of course, I assured them would be completed and that we would really look forward to bringing the information in front of them so that they could then kind of work through recommendations and figure out what they want to pick up and when. So, you know, I will say to all of you that, you know, it's definitely my commitment to you that we'll continue to work on this going forward. Whether it be in this task force conversation or whether it be after we're completed with our efforts here and we're working with the legislature and working with the administration, you know, just working within the department effort to move forward on our dam work. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll make some closing comments on this and then offer a suggestion, I guess, just based on the comments as to maybe a little bit of a different vote to recognize what everybody has said. But basically, I think I am certainly moved by working on this for 20 years, as well as what John said about Oroville in California. I believe that's the tallest dam in the US or something like that. And it's been a long time since that problem happened. And I have one of my key staff in my office often likes to tell people, we work at the pace of government. Don't expect anything fast. So I believe it's incumbent on us to remember a couple of three things. Number one, there will always be a bigger storm. I was asked by a reporter if they do what you recommend, that means there will be no more failures, right? Nope. Dams will fail. It will rain more somewhere, somehow, and they will fail. We can't prevent failures other than fully removing every single dam in the state. So number one, that will happen. What I see as our responsibility is to reduce the frequency and the severity of the next failure, the failure after that, and the next 10 failures. Instead of having 300 failures in about 100 years in the Michigan Dam network system, and that information was provided to us in the attachments, and obviously not all of us were able to read all those attachments. Instead of that, can we make it so the next 10 failures are stretched out over a much longer period, over 50 years? Can we make it so that we don't have a Black River type failure or a Houghton Hancock type failure, or people have named dam failures I haven't even heard of? And when we talk about things we haven't heard of, the general public has no, we've talked about public trust and public interest. The general public, we heard people testify they didn't know they were in an inundation zone. They're extremely frustrated that it doesn't appear to them anyone ever tried to reach out and tell them they were in an inundation zone. I don't know if people are aware of this, but I learned from a friend in the Michigan Floodplain and Stormwater Association that Midland, Michigan actually has, they participate, in the federal flood insurance program, and they have done the most. They're in a difficult spot. They're in a low spot with Three Rivers. They have done more to earn points that reduce your insurance rates than any other community in Michigan. They're busting their butts to stay safe. And what happened? It's totally out of their control. The city of Midland has no control over what's upstream. So we heard testimony from people who were extremely frustrated that they're exposed to a risk that they don't know about, and people in government are aware of, and hasn't been addressed. So certainly I'm going to speak in favor of the general tone of things, and I feel that the tone is appropriate. My recollection from the information provided was that at one point in 06, if I'm correct, the dam safety program was eliminated. So that wasn't a road to success. So I say all of those things to build on the concept that a reporter asked me, tried to say, well, which recommendations need to happen to make it, you know, the most safer? It's like, well, we've given the full suite of recommendations. Many of them require 5 different things to be acted upon to actually move the needle. And let's remember that we're talking about, as John Roshak pointed out, it takes a long time for this. Let's just say a decade from now. Let's say everything that we recommend is authorized and approved in 2021. Many of them require quite a bit of time and energy. Someone has to go and collect information on all the dams so we have a better understanding of how risky they are. How long will it take to collect information on over 1,000 dams? How long will it take to invent the portal to upload that information? How long will it take to calibrate the tool that's used to look at our system? However long that takes, whether it's 10 years, 5 years, or 22 years, all the dams are getting older. So things are getting worse while we're trying to make it better. And every recommendation that we see deferred, whether we choose to defer it or Eagle does or the legislature does, every recommendation that's deferred means that you get to where you want to go more slowly, and that you set the bar for where you want to end up a little lower. So that's all I can say about it. We spent a lot of time putting this package together. I totally understand that all of the recommendations may not be taken, but I don't really apologize for saying this is urgent. It's been ignored a long time. And whoever said ticking time bomb, it really hit the nail on the head. You know, how many 300-year rains has Midland seen in the last 5 or 6 years? I think 2. I might be wrong. How many 500-year storms has Detroit seen? How many 300-year storms has Lenawee County seen? I think we all grasp these dams are not designed for what's going on and what's for coming our way. So I throw that out there just to fully admit that I participated in, you know, that tone that the officers felt was appropriate. But what I heard today is not everybody agrees that the tone is appropriate. It sounded like the majority agrees the tone is appropriate, and certainly the majority agrees that we need to scale back at least a couple of 3 areas where we're a little tight. So where I'm headed with this little ramble is I'm going to suggest that maybe our vote could be this. I don't believe, it didn't sound like anyone really wanted to totally draw the brakes on it, but I respect that a number of people felt like they didn't quite have enough time to absorb and digest this. So what I would suggest is we've all given our input and feedback, and maybe what we could be voting on is, would it be okay to ask that the officers work with PSC and Eagle to tidy up some of the detailed language that has come through, and to basically make a decision on how this should be finalized. Certainly everybody would be welcome to submit information. So I'd like to take that vote now, and if that's no good, I'll try something else that says let's have the whole group get back together. But as you all can imagine, with the volume of text edits there are, it might take quite some time for us as a full group to really work through every single bullet. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and just call the question basically again to say just a quick yes or no on, are we okay with a small group moving forward based on the comments that have been made to scale back some of the things that really are pushing the envelope. We don't want to sound like this, we're saying the sky, we're crying wolf. I think the sky is falling, literally, but I don't want people to feel like we're crying wolf and exaggerating, and that is absolutely important and well taken.
Mr. Chair, can I clarify your motion?
Yeah, go ahead.
I assume that you're also suggesting that that version would then go back out to task force members, and task force members would respond over email that they're comfortable with what that version of the report looks like?
Yeah, basically saying, let us take another crack at it, and rather than necessarily having another meeting convened, provide another go at it and get honest feedback on, maybe not my favorite, but I can live with this more so than the version that's in front of us today. So presumably that could work with Eagle staff. I honestly don't know that PSC and staff needs the officers to provide that input. I'm comfortable with PSC and Eagle making those edits and returning it to us, but I wanted to just throw that out there that we might be a resource to them.
Evan, this Bill, I want to say one thing that having been through a lot of these reports and been in government, et cetera, the executive summary is really critical. And the last paragraph of the executive summary is really good. And it says, the recommendations from the Michigan Dam Safety Taskforce provide an array of public policy objectives along with a variety of implementation strategies. Continuing the current path of woeful underinvestment is a violation of the public trust, a path that leads to tragic losses of property and life and is ultimately more expensive to Michiganders. It is imperative that Governor Whitmer, her administration, the Michigan legislature take meaningful action to advance the recommendations of this task force. The human and economic costs of business as usual are far too great to ignore. I think that's a wonderful paragraph that summarizes where we are. There's some other things in the report that could be changed, but I love that last paragraph in the executive summary.
Yeah. So that would be the kind of input I think for people to share. If we could say maybe about the next week, give people time to digest, time to provide comments, either reactions to what Paul Maloko was kind enough to send out and flag for everyone, or to have your own reactions. I like this section or that section more or less. So I guess with that, I just like to kind of get a quick yes or no of, if people feel like a week is enough time to get input and sort of let that input be titrated, measured, and resolved, independent of group discussion on every single proposed edit. It is really a yes or no. Is that clear enough?
Well, are you saying you the executive, you guys, the officers are going to redo it a little bit first and get it back out to us, or you want comments? Which are you saying? Or you want comments now?
Right. We'd certainly like to get everybody's comments and input. If you have anything else to add, because although we're talking about this in the context of not everybody didn't have a lot of time to digest the report, however much time they had to digest the report, they had a lot less time to digest the suggested edits. So I think we would like to see people be able to get back to us by Friday with just the reactions to what is written as is, and allow us an opportunity to turn around the sections in question and say, this is Plan B. Can we live with this section?
Mr. Chair, if I may make a quick comment, since this is a board meeting, perhaps you can present it in form of a motion, somebody seconds it, and then we'll all either vote on it or vote it down to send it down to staff to take another crack at it, and we'll provide comments, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds like somebody who's been doing this for a while. I like that suggestion, Paul.
I just didn't want anybody to question, what we're doing, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds fair enough. So let me try one more time to suggest what the motion I heard was, and I'm going to say that I believe Director Ajaba made the motion to have a vote to either accept the report. A yes would mean let's accept the report and move on, and a no vote would be let's ask staff to spend time to address the comments that we've had, to use whatever resources they need to use to gather all the input, with the expectation, of course, that we're all going to get comments in by Friday. Was that your motion, sir?
Fair enough. Well said.
Do we have support?
Support.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion as supported? Anybody, any lack of clarity? I think I've proposed 3 different ways of voting today, and I don't want to be in too much of a hurry. I'd like to get the hands up and down, but I'd like to make sure everybody's comfortable. They know what they're voting for or against.
Say
So
it
Evan,
one more
if I-
time, Mr. Chair, please.
I'm sorry, Tanya?
Do you mind repeating one more time what the yes is, accept as is?
A yes would be accept as is. A no would be asking staff to work with the task force to quickly turn around a revised version that basically is not a full rewrite. It addresses the most objectionable language.
Got it. Thank you.
Paul kept saying it quicker than me. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm going to just make a comment up front, which is that I am a voting member, but I'm going to abstain from this vote because I want to make sure that it takes the temperature of all of you. So just to be clear.
Thank you. My apologies. I had not caught that, or I haven't looked at the list for long enough. I just thought it was an ex officio in there. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I could weigh in, I'm going to vote no on this, and not because I don't think that we've done a great job, but because I don't think that we have to get it done today. And I think there is still room for improvement. And so I don't want my no vote to be seen as an expression that we haven't done it, or even that the report, if passed, wouldn't be acceptable, but that we still have both the opportunity and the time to further improve it. And I think it's worth the effort.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. I think that's along the lines of what a lot of people had to say. Okay, with that, is it, maybe the best question is anyone in favor of moving the report forward as is? Raise your hand or signify by saying yes. All right, and those who would like to see staff take another crack at the Executive Summary Chapter 2 and conclusions, please signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Director Ajaba, for helping me navigate through that. I apologize to people. When I do audibles, I am not able to be concise, and that's not my skill set.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But Evan, to clarify, that yes was the no vote, right?
That is correct. That is the challenge of these votes. Typically, you're signifying one way or the other. So that is correct. We're going to take another crack at it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Evan. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you, Paul. Really important to bring up. I think if you had not brought it up, there might have been a lot of people feeling a little uncomfortable or having, second thoughts. Sometimes the third time you read something, you think, oh my goodness, is that really what I meant to say? So let's not hit send yet. Thank you. With that, I don't have a lot of closing comments. I do want to thank everybody for the work so far. I know it was hard work. I know we were rushed. And today we found out we're not quite done. So we've got a little more work. And now I need more fingers. And we're going to kind of need to turn around pretty quickly. So again, the goal would be to get this out by Friday. We will work with PSC so you are provided with more concise, clear instructions that I'm able to verbally put out today that will, as pointed out by Bill Rustum, not only receive comments by Friday, but let you know when you'll see a revised version. And I can appreciate that everyone will want to digest that revised version a little further. So let's just say we'll spell out that time frame in writing to the task force. But again, I thank you all for your time to date and appreciate your willingness to really get this right, to really get us to the finish line so we can be proud of the work that everyone has done together. It's been a good experience. I miss being physically together, talking to people over coffee and learning more about your dogs. I guess we've learned about people's dogs and cats pretty well on the Zoom here. With that, I am done with this portion of the agenda. I don't really have any closing comments specifically. I think I covered that. So I will turn it over to Director Clark for any other additional comments, closing comments, maybe a re-review of what you mentioned up front as far as next steps for all of our audience that may not have been here at the beginning.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. So, I'm going to start first of all by saying I had kind of some thoughts put together, assuming we were going to have a version done today. And it's still appropriate. This isn't over, right? There's a lot of work to be done here. And as we're wrapping up over the next couple of days and making sure that the report reflects what the task force wants it to reflect, will be then next steps, like starting right again on Monday. So I mentioned earlier, there are pieces that are budgetary, and that's work that the legislature's already been supportive of in kind of the recent past, and there'll be more work going forward there, where we need to make sure that the dollars are there to make sure that we can actually do what we've recommended in the report. And then there are statutory changes, and that is something that we're all going to have conversations together with the legislature, and not only the members of the task force, but very importantly, members of the public and those who have been involved in these discussions, but maybe didn't sit on the task force. There's a lot of work when it comes to crafting what bills there might look like. And then in the meantime, we will continue working from an Eagle perspective to move things forward. And so I'm proud of the work that the team's already done, expanding our mapping capability, creating a dam safety unit, increasing the number of folks that are getting out into the field, and making sure that we're improving and doing more from an investigation enforcement perspective. So we're going to keep working on those things and look forward to doing that in partnership with all of you going forward. So before I hand the mic back, though, I do want to say a big thank you to Public Sector Consultants, who's been an important asset in this work and has worked very hard to get all of this organized together and to get it all right. And so we really appreciate that. And continuing appreciation for members of the public who have been participating in these discussions. We've received public comment at almost every session, as well as at the public comment session. And certainly to the task force members. You all picked up a pretty heavy load and helped us kind of think through it, and illuminated new parts of that to look at and new direction. And it is a lot of gratitude that I would express to all of you. I think that this has been a very deep group of experts and has moved that needle forward, which we've all have said on numerous occasions. But finally, I want to say a thank you to our officers. So to Douglas Jester, to John Borshak, and certainly to our chair, Evan Pratt. You all have put in a lot of hours and done a lot of work to advance this ball, and that's very greatly appreciated. We owe you a debt. So stay tuned, more to do, and appreciate the work that's necessary for the report component and the task force effort. And then also look forward to working with all of you as we get into this next phase of work, which is having conversations to move the recommendations forward. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sounds good. I thought I saw a hand up, but I think it was from before. Abby, were you all set?
No, actually, I do have a comment. Had a media inquiry, and so want to know who's the best person on the task force to direct that to, so we're not trying to handle those individually as task force members. So just curious on who wants to be the point person to answer some of those questions from media outlets.
Want to take that, Director Clark?
Yeah, sure, I can share. So Nick Asseldorf from our team would be happy to help there. And if you are interested in having that conversation, Nick can, help you schedule and do that sort of thing. Or if you're interested in having somebody else on the task force take it, either the chair or myself, or someone else, we can handle that too. So happy to handle it in either way, Abby, but Nick would be a great asset.
If you can just pass me Nick's contact information along, I greatly appreciate it. I think part of it kind of was more of a local question about how some of our recommendations are going to impact local dams, in our neck of the woods, so on the west side of Michigan. So I'm comfortable answering some of that, but some of the other technical questions, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to be answering, and would like to pass that along to another point of contact.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising that, Abby. I mentioned a couple of times that I've had fielded questions from reporters, but those have all come through Nick. Nick has contacted whomever he feels or staff has felt is appropriate based on the type of the questions are being asked by whatever the media outlet is or what have you. So somebody taught me a long time ago, my job is to stay out of the papers, and I really like to do that as much as possible, for sure. I'm not sure that's possible in this particular setting, but great question. Any other last comments from any of the task force members then before we sign off?
Evan, I just want to make one clarification. Yep. We had no dam failures in Houghton County during our alleged 1,000-year flood event. Just
I apologize.
Yeah, that and I want to make a little point about Orville dam failure too. Orville was a FERC dam and it followed all rules that we're looking at implementing here, and it still failed. And yet our 140-year-old dams didn't fail, and I just want to make that point. And I'm representing the small guy, the small dams, and we don't have a funding base to pay for a lot of our dams. And when I look at the rules, the insurance and everything like that, dam removal will become an issue. We spoke with Dan Devon and others about dam removal, and my concern really is the catch-22 issue of removing dams, and that's not been addressed in this discussion at all, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at. So I just want to throw that out.
Yeah, no, great point. There's environmental impacts one way or the other, for sure. Any other task force members? Closing thoughts? Great. If not, you've all got a little bit of found time today, and we'll apply that found time to the work we've got in front of us to get this to the finish line. Again, thank you for everyone for caring so much about getting this right. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Evan.
Thanks.